Thank you for joining us on the 43rd episode of the Hail Mary podcast. We're back to preview this week's pivotal game against UAB and throw some Hail Mary shots downfield for listeners to love or hate. Let's get started.
All right, because we're recording this on Sunday night, we don't really have an update on any UTSA happenings in terms of injury reports or, anything else that's transpired. So just look to see, how things are going. I mean, honestly, even when we do record, like on a Monday or even Tuesday, we still don't really have an update on injuries. It's usually game time.
Right. I mean, the only information that really has come out is that Greg Lucas said in his article today that they were initially targeting Payne Abert to come back this game. So that's a potential, but we don't know if he's practiced or, if he has practiced, if he would just be a backup or a potential starter.
It would still be somewhat big because he at least provides depth.
Right.
Even if he doesn't start. And I would imagine they probably wouldn't start him
right.
on the road. But you know what? Could be wrong. I mean, trailer surprises all the time. Even with fourth downs with opposing coaches, they have to prepare for that. Podcasters have to prepare for the fact that he's just going to throw us a curveball anyway. So
that's right.
All right, we're going to go into our UAB preview. This week, UAB fell to FAU. Let me back up real quick in that Atos and I had 3 football games going.
We did.
Saturday night. We were watching on the TV.
FAU and UAB.
Yes, sorry. We were watching UAB and FAU, and then on your iPhone screen, you're watching the Tarleton game.
Yep.
Against Sam Houston State, and I was watching UTEP and Middle Tennessee go at it in El Paso. Mm-hmm. When there's a bye week, we usually think we're going to just do some recovery, but for the most part, it's sitting on the couch and having each of us have one game on the screen and then having another on our phones and just taking in as much sicko college football as we can.
Yep.
I should say it sicko style because we totally gorged on some college football this weekend.
We did. Enough
to talk about UAB, hopefully as intelligently, I think, as any other previews we've had. Maybe better. Probably not better. I'm just going to say that. Anyway, they fell 24-17 to FAU. The game was actually a little bit closer than the score, which seems weird considering it was about a touchdown difference. Here's the deal. UAB was playing with their backup quarterback. I don't know that that's still an excuse because they still, they just I'm not really sure what to make of them, and I think that's the biggest thing is that they're just this big enigma.
Right.
They are 4-4. They're 2-3 in conference now. The losses are by a combined. They're all been away, by the way.
Right.
Have been by a combined 21 points total. They've won all their games at home. I'm just going to throw a little caveat here. It seems like a pretty weak schedule with I think the toughest game being Georgia Southern. But Alabama A&M, Middle Tennessee, Charlotte. In Middle Tennessee and Charlotte's definitely the bottom feeder of CUSA. Middle Tennessee is near the bottom. They haven't won any conference games up until this weekend against UTEP, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Other than that, you got an up and down Georgia Southern team, which beat Nebraska and essentially got Scott Frost fired, and then came back and then kind of lost a couple of the games that they shouldn't have. So, the fun of college football, right? One week you're really up and you knock off somebody. The next week you're losing to a bottom feeder from your conference or somewhere, another conference.
Yeah, and FAU has been very up and down themselves. So
yeah, I would say this. N'Kosi Perry, their quarterback, really had a good game. And I think that's what... He was hot most of the game, and I think that's what kept UAB off balance. Mm-hmm. That said, you have head coach Brian Vincent, who was an offensive coordinator under Bill Clark. He made plenty of mistakes, but this isn't the first UAB game that I've watched. Mentioned last week that we were at our nephew's football game, and I was watching, again on the screen, UAB take on Western Kentucky. And in that game, Dustin Hopkins, their starting quarterback, got knocked out with a concussion. Jacob Zeno, their backup quarterback, came in and played. Really wasn't very good at all. He was 3 for 10, staring down receivers, just didn't look prepared to play, and he's like a redshirt junior, so hasn't had a lot of snaps. That said, I felt like Brian Vincent should have had this team in a much better position to play.
Mm-hmm.
You can get past playing with a backup quarterback. I say that only because Troy did that earlier in the season against Western Kentucky. So there are examples of it being okay that you lose your starting quarterback, and your coaching staff just really makes some good adjustments. But I think that's the problem here, that UAB does not make good adjustments at halftime, which I think is key. I say that also because we listened to the Blazer Victory Pod with John Duncan and Darren Smith today. It was our gut reaction after that UAB FAU game, and I don't know about you, but they were down bad, and they sounded like they needed a hug. Like they just were lost for words. I don't know if you want to give your thoughts there.
They could barely get their thoughts out. They were so frustrated with the team. And at one point, I think it was Darian who said something about there's a really good rivalry right now going on between UAB and their timeouts or something, because they're apparently like having game clock management issues with their new coach.
Yeah, in this game, essentially they call a timeout right before third down. Crucial drive. They're getting close to the red zone, and they fail on the third down conversion. So then they call timeout again right before fourth down, which is where Darian went crazy because he, in his own words, you should have had another play ready.
Right.
May have been John that said that, but regardless, even the announcer said that.
Right. You
got to have a play ready. And we as fans, I think, know that pretty well. You got to have something else ready to go. It wasn't ready, and I think because of like the offensive struggles and the way that this team just isn't flowing, I can't see Brian Vincent lasting longer than this season, unless UAB feels like they can give him like a short contract just to kind of pay, just kind of patch things until they find a better head coach. Mm-hmm. But I think they need to make a change. I think it's clear from even listening to the podcast guys that change is needed. And let's just see what happens, I think, on the offseason. But just something to think about here. Let's go to their offense. Their offense is ranked 33rd in total yards, 4th in rushing offense with 247.4 yards per game, 110th in passing offense, though, 190.1 yards per game. That's going to be a little crucial here because it's a total of 437.5 yards per game. It's still about 30, 40 yards lower than what UTSA averages. They're also ranked 63rd in scoring at 30.1 points per game. UTSA is more like 35 points per game average. All this to say that their quarterbacks are Dustin Hopkins and Jacob Zeno, as I've mentioned before. Dustin Hopkins, just want to remind everybody, he was 15 for 22 in the Dome last year, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He played big. He got a little cocky near the end, but I think also because, remember, we called that podcast episode the flinch that won the West. Mm-hmm. I watched some of those highlights again today, and I can still see the disappointment from the offensive linemen that they essentially had about an inch or so to go on their own side of the field, and they didn't go for it. I think they've got that in the back of their minds, but it should be interesting how this kind of plays out because we don't know if Dustin Hopkins is going to be ready to play this game. He's been solid so far this year, completing about 67% of his passes, throwing for about 1,233 yards. He's got 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He's played well against UTSA, so I think it's going to be essentially coming up with 2 game plans. One for Dustin Hopkins and one for the aforementioned Jacob Zeno. He's actually from Jay High School here in San Antonio. Went to Baylor and transferred from Baylor this past season. Came over to UAB. He's got, like I had mentioned before, he hasn't really taken that many snaps. And you can tell his youth and he's still sort of raw. I think he needs more time. He needs some more coaching, really, because he's got a 50% completion percentage. He's thrown for 288 yards this year, 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I mean, hence why you look at the UAB offense and say it's 110th in passing offense. Mostly because they're a ground-based offense. Mm-hmm. But even with Zeno, it wasn't like they were trying to pass. He really struggles reading coverages. Against Western Kentucky, I get that you're coming in cold, but man, he was staring down receivers and really making it easy for that Western Kentucky defense to really defend him. That said, it was still a close game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of told you, I think, a little bit more about Western Kentucky as much as it did about UAB. Let's talk about their running backs because it begins and ends with Dwayne McBride.
Mm-hmm.
Dude is a monster. Last year, 24 rushes for 149 yards. Only one touchdown, though, which I thought was interesting. So I thought he had gotten in more. I was wrong. This year, 164 rushes for 1,146 yards. He's got about a 7 yards per carry.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got 12 touchdowns. He's ripped off some long runs. Very good runner. He has really taken to what UAB does, which is, obviously running the ball, but he does it phenomenally well, even though defenses know that it's him that's going to be the only runner. Their change of pace back is Jermaine Brown Jr., a little bit different runner than Dwayne is. He's rushed last season. Let me back up. Last season's game, he rushed 4 times for 28 yards, 7 yards per game there again. This year, 85 rushes for 496 yards. He's got 5.8 yards per carry, and he's got 3 touchdowns. It's really the McBride offense, though. I say that because they've got some talented wide receivers, yet when I read you some of the stats, you're going to be kind of befuddled because we're 8 games into the season, and it's going to seem weird that they only have these stats.
Right.
Wide receiver Trey Shropshire is the guy you probably think of right away. Scored the first touchdown in last season's game, caught a 74-yard pass in broken coverage from UTSA, but he only had 3 catches. But they went for 130 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. This year, he has 18 receptions for 449 yards and 2 touchdowns. 18 receptions in 8 games.
Yeah.
I struggle to figure out what the issue is, whether he just disappears or there's problems, but it's not the first game in which I looked up some information on him that for some reason they just go away from him. It's just like he'll put up all his production either in the first half or in the second half, but it's not a complete game where they're throwing. Again, that's UAB. I think that's part of the enigma of UAB.
Mm-hmm.
You've got weapons, why don't you completely use them? That said, TJ Jones is their leading wide receiver this year. He's caught 23 passes for 189 yards. 23 passes for 189. Again, lower average.
Right.
It's not too explosive. Shropshire is the guy. Tall dude. TJ's, I think, a little bit shorter, but not that much shorter. Let's go on to their defense. It's ranked 23rd in total yards, 328.2 yards per game, 85th in rushing defense. They give about 156.8 yards per game. However, they're 9th in passing defense with 171.5 yards per game. They're ranked 20th in scoring. They give about 18.5 points per game. You heard the score earlier, 24-17 against FAU. That's where it stays. They're ranked 11th in stop rate. Now, I know you're going to ask me, what is stop rate? It's another fun, cool stat that I'm throwing out there here for you. Stop rate essentially is a better metric, I think, to talk about when it comes to defense. So The Athletic puts it out weekly, and what it is just a defense's ability to either get turnover on downs on a drive, a turnover, or just a punt. So essentially, how many times do you get off the field and don't let an offense go? They're at 74.6%. Now, this was about a couple games ago, so it's probably gone down a little bit since then. But last year, they were at 67.4%. So it's not that much different. It's a tough defense, just to say the least. They're led by linebacker Noah Wilder, who's had 77 tackles. Noah Wilder should actually come up in everybody's head right now because in the game in the Dome last season, he's the one that missed putting fingertips on the pass to Oscar right before Oscar caught the winning touchdown. So I'm going to imagine that Noah's been circling this game because of the fact that he's notorious for essentially getting almost dunked on, right? And I don't think he actually played that play badly. It's just the way the breaks go, right?
Right.
They also have, they have some other really good players. Safety Grayson Cash, cornerback Mac McWilliams, and defensive lineman Fish McWilliams. There's no relation. They're from the same town. There's no relation, though. They went to different high schools.
Mac and Fish.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Those guys are really good players. Graded high on PFF as well. Watch them play against FAU. This is an overall tough defense. And these are some of the names that I think you're going to hear come Saturday afternoon or watching this game in Birmingham, whether you're in Birmingham or whether you're watching it just like we will be on TV. So let's go to the keys to victory. On offense, I think UTSA has to get that run game going early. I mentioned just how this UAB defense isn't as tough against the run as they have been in the past. I also think they need to shorten that passing game a little bit to try to maximize some yards after catch. There's just no way that I see this UAB defense allowing UTSA / Frank Harris to go back, sit there, and just bomb the hell out of us. I think it's got to be some quick hitters, really going to get these wide receivers into some space so that they can actually make some moves, and get the chains moving, right? I think that's the best thing or best recipe for UTSA's offense. On defense, put it bluntly, you got to slow down McBride. There's no way I think that they can stop him. We saw what they did against North Texas, but none of those running backs are as close to as good as Dwayne McBride. So slow him, but you're not going to be able to completely contain him. The second key to me is going to be, well, it depends on which quarterback you're playing. Against Hopkins, you're going to want to try to, again, stop the run as much as possible and force him to, pass. He's still a pretty good passer, so, you're just going to have to try to take one thing away from them and try to make them a passing team. Against Jacob Zena, though, I feel like they can mix the coverages some. If they do that, I think they're going to confuse him, and I think it'll lead to some turnovers. And I think that's big for this UTSA defense. If they can create some turnovers, put UAB in a hole, this could be a winning recipe. So let's go to our way too early prediction. Look, UAB is tough to beat at home. We already talked about how they're 4-0, but it is a great opportunity for UTSA to send UAB spiraling out of bowl eligibility contention. The guys on the Blazer Victory podcast said as much. They were trying to find victories after their loss to FAU, and they were only able, I think, to find maybe one at best, and even then they were questioning it against La Tech.
Right. I mean, hopefully, I think they play North Texas, don't they, after this?
They do. They play them, though.
So, I mean, that would be great if they could, lose to UTSA and then come back just, really wanting a victory and beat North Texas. That'd be wonderful.
Right, but I think the guys in the Blazer Victory were like, okay, so we get two tough games, at home.
Right.
Go to LSU and go do La Tech.
Yeah, I mean, they play UTSA, North Texas, LSU, and La Tech. So yeah, if we beat them, then really their only opportunity to get to bowl eligibility is beating both North Texas and Louisiana Tech, because it is pretty unlikely that they're going to beat LSU. Although I don't know, LSU's a bit of a wild card at times too.
They're good though. They're much better. They don't.
Not that I think that UAB is going to beat them, but
Yeah, it would be a fun victory. It would be another head-scratching victory for G5, right? All right. Here's the deal, though. On the UTSA side, every single time that we think that UTSA will come out and just
impose their will,
blow another team away by getting some great drives, getting some defensive stops, getting some really good offensive drives together. It's never gone that way so far this season. It's really been throw a couple of light punches, and then the opponent punches right back, and then we're stuck in this kind of back and forth game. But the defensive stop rates for both teams are night and day, whereas UAB's, I talked about, was 70-ish%. UTSA is 57%. They just can't get off the field, and I think that's part of the problem when you're looking at this game this far out. I just think that, UAB may be trying to fight for Vincent's job.
Sure.
Because, they've known him forever, so why not try to fight for his job? So, I think UTSA struggles to contain McBride, but Frank comes through as usual. So, give me UTSA 27-24 and another tough physical game.
All right. Before we go, let's talk about what happened in the rest of Conference USA this weekend.
Sounds good.
Really was hoping that Western Kentucky was going to do us a solid and at least beat up on North Texas, if not beat them. But that was the other way around. North Texas kind of steamrolled Western Kentucky 40-13.
I didn't even feel like it was as close as it seemed. I mean, honestly, we talked about when Western Kentucky played UTSA that they throw to the sidelines a lot. It's a lot of just kind of short bubble screens. They don't really throw the ball down the field. Well, then we kind of saw why they don't throw them down the field,
right?
Because it was definitely Austin Reed had some problems. He has a good arm, but they just couldn't connect downfield. I mean, honestly, going sideline to sideline really plays into trying to challenge a defense to be able to tackle well, and North Texas did that, and they really shut Western Kentucky down, and then they just beat up on them on offense as they kind of just beat up that defense. The defense just isn't very good, as I had kind of mentioned before, and lo and behold, early in the season, Western Kentucky was thumping their chest about the fact that, this was better team than last season, but, defensively, they can't stop anybody, and offensively, they hadn't been held under 30 points, I think, until before they lost to Troy. Ever since then, they've struggled to put up more than 30 points. I think they put up 35 against one of the other teams that they played. But, yeah, I mean, it's been just a string of offensive disappointment for them. So I kind of revel in the fact that they thumped their chest and now are getting their tails between their legs. But, hey, that's what happens. You fall off once you lose to UTSA.
Yeah, I mean, they fell behind initially and they just couldn't get caught up. And frankly, they couldn't get out of their own way. I mean, they had 2 turnovers and 9 penalties for 85 yards. So that puts North Texas firmly into second place.
They have got us square in their targets. I mean, We listened to the Seth Luttrell radio show this past week, and he was very short and concise when he said, we're going to see those guys again. And that's exactly how he said it. Did not put any more emotion to it. You knew that those guys want to play us again in San Antonio, and frankly, it's got to kind of give you a little bit of a nervous tick, I think.
But, I got to say, I was listening to the Republic of Football podcast, and they had kind of anticipated that Western Kentucky would win this game. And then they were thinking, okay, wouldn't it be great if North Texas really came down to the wire against Rice? And they're both maybe looking for bowl eligibility, and their coaches are trying to hold on to their jobs, and they just run the ball at each other. And then at the end of the game, they're like, just put Bloomgren and Luttrell in the center of the field and kind of let them wrestle it out. And, whoever wins keeps their job.
If Seth Luttrell did that, or they did do that, I would love, again, Seth Luttrell to be the villain. Maybe grab something out of his pants, blind Bloomgren, and then just wrestle him to the ground, and that'd be great. I went too far, but I don't care.
Yeah. Anywho, probably not going to happen, but maybe there's still a possibility if UAB, is having to lick their wounds after UTSA beats them, and Rice is looking for some kind of redemption at the end, but. As it stands right now, North Texas firmly in second place with Western Kentucky and FAU tied in third. Talked a little bit about Middle Tennessee and UTEP. Middle Tennessee got their first conference win against UTEP. It was a rough game to watch.
It's typical UTEP. You, every single time they have a chance to kind of get over that hump, they just can't.
Yeah, and Middle Tennessee is just... they have not... This was really their first victory since they beat Miami. So it's been a rough season for them.
Rough season for both teams.
Yeah. Charlotte pulled off a shocker, though, beating Rice 56-23 and getting their first conference win.
They looked impressive. I got to see some of that game. And I got to tell you, where's this Charlotte team been all year? But then again, I think you can say that about a lot of teams. All of a sudden, they'll just come out. They fire their coaches, and it's okay. We
got nothing left, so might as well go for it.
We're going to go all out.
And then the other surprise of the weekend was FIU beating La Tech 42-34 in double overtime. It's the first time since 2019 that FIU has won consecutive games. So good for them and, turning their season around. La Tech was playing with a second string quarterback, but FIU just kept fighting and they won through the air.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the right words, but especially to answer that consecutive games streak, it's like I feel like saying we've been there, and it feels terrible. But you're right. Good for them. Like I said, Mike McIntyre was going to have a long rebuilding job. He could potentially get bowl eligible this season.
Yeah,
which would be crazy. And
an
honestly,
outside chance that FIU goes to a bowl and UAB doesn't. How crazy would that be?
Crazy, but I would say, hey, look, I get that everybody's talking about potentially Coach Traylor as Coach of the Year. McIntyre would have to be Coach of the Year because that was a mess that he got. And if he's able to get them to bowl eligibility, that's just much more of, I think, a better job than what Traylor has done. And Traylor's done a hell of a job, so I'm not minimizing.
Well, it's much more of an uphill battle than Traylor had. But yeah, FIU has North Texas, FAU, UTEP, and Middle Tennessee left. So UTEP, Middle Tennessee, they could win those games. FAU's up and down, who knows,
And to your point earlier, you can always cross your fingers. Maybe FIU gets up and
shocks North Texas.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yep.
All right, let's move on and talk about the women's soccer team. They beat UTEP on Friday, 1-0. They ended their regular season 9-5-4, 4-3-3 in Conference USA. They're now headed to the tournament as the number 6 seed. It's their highest seed in program history, and they'll play number 3 UAB on November 2nd at 11 a.m.
Oh, I will be streaming that game because I'm interested to see how this team plays against UAB, because earlier in October, they actually tied UAB and got an important point in order for them, I think, to put themselves really in position to get that 6th seed. So it was 1-1. And, in the conference tournament, it can end in a tie. So, let's cheer on our ladies, and hopefully they can make a little run and, kind of extend Kendall Kloza, Isa Hernandez, Jill Schneider, and Abby Castle's career. Those are, I think, the 4 seniors that we have. So, crossing my fingers that we get to see, at least those ladies play a few games in the tournament.
Yeah, so far they are tied for their most wins in Conference USA since we joined the conference. So, pretty impressive.
Very impressive.
And basketball season is quickly approaching. We went to the tip-off dinner on Tuesday of last week. Got to hear from a couple of the students, both on the men's and women's side. On the men's side, Japhet Mador, John Buggs, and Isaiah Adu-Nkra. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, sorry. We're there. On the women's side, it was Elisa Coleman, Haley Atwood, and Kira White. Kira White is originally from San Antonio. She's a graduate of Converse Judson, but she just transferred from USC this year. So she brings a lot of great experience. She played in 77 games for USC. So again, that's really going to help, I think, this very young team to have some experience. Any thoughts or anything that you wanted to share from that?
Yeah, I think, it's really cool to see the athletes really kind of, it felt like, and I'm going to say this metaphorically, but kind of let their hair down. They took questions, and they seemed to have some fun with the answering the questions. More importantly, they went and looked for all of the people that were there, all of the UTSA fans, I should say, and they just said thank you for coming. And that was different than last season when we went to it, that we didn't have any. We went up and talked to the players as opposed to the players coming around and talking to us. So sort of a change. And I think just looking at maybe the leadership that we're going to see from these two teams. Because,
particularly on the men's side, it felt very different from the men's players, I think, than what we saw last year.
Yeah, and that's encouraging. So we talked about last week, they're
picked to finish last.
You talked about the fact that they can only go up, and hopefully they can pull off some surprises. But regardless how you feel about the men's basketball team, let's show them some support because they're also UTSA student athletes, right? But let's also make sure to also support some of the female sports. And this women's basketball team, I think, can be really special in terms of not necessarily, I think, winning a conference title or, going to the NCAA, but just having some pretty great moments that I think are sorely lacking from our basketball teams. Our history hasn't been a storied history, I should say, from the UTSA
right.
on either side of the fence. So I think both of them, at least all the athletes that were there, seem to support each other. Coach Henson, Coach Aston seem to also want to support, each other's teams and each other. And to your point, that I think was what felt really different, because I think too often you find like there's just either the men's coaches don't really support the female coaches or, vice versa. I think it's just a different feeling around these UTSA athletics, and I think it brings a little bit more of excitement. And I think really just, has, like Traylor has kind of said, it takes all of us, right? So it feels more like you can bond with these teams than, ever before.
And the men are playing an exhibition game this week, Wednesday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. in the Combo. So if you are able, go ahead and come out and support the men.
Sounds like a deal.
All right, well, that about wraps it up for us on the Hail Mary podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm Atovs.
And I'm the Tovs.
We'll be back next week to recap our big win against UAB.
Birds up.